Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 25. Chapter 25. Clash. Kick! The recoil from clashing with the greatsword sent agonizing pain tearing through Ronyan's grip. Yet without a moment to tend to his throbbing hand, he rolled forward to dodge the next attack. Whoosh! The owner of the greatsword, who had just missed slashing the space where Ronyan had been standing, growled impatiently. You dodge quite well for a little brat. The knight who wielded a greatsword half the size of an ordinary person, yet resembling a long sword in his massive hands, glared with narrowed eyes, readying his weapon once more. Grill! No time for complacency. The tide of battle is strange. At that moment, Teslan Knight, who had been driving back a MacLine knight through coordinated attacks with an ally, shouted a warning. What? You think I'm playing around? This kid's no joke. I'm not kidding. Look behind you. What are you talking about? Whiff. Whiff. What's that noise? Though Ronyan could not fully comprehend the enemy's words, he took the brief pause in combat to catch his ragged breath. The sheer realization that he had been ducking and fleeing from the gigantic knight, remembering that he's not a prodigy knight but a mere fledgling who'd only recently awakened, sunk in deeply. I still can't lose. I mustn't falter here. You must also take up the role meant for your brother. The voice of Ronyan's father, heard just before war broke out, resurfaced in his mind. Even without that reminder, facing the already disadvantageous battlefield, he knew he must perform the role of at least one knight to hold on to any semblance of hope. Forcibly ignoring the stinging pain in his hand, Ronyan kept a close watch on Grill. What? An enemy turned, exposing his back, and swung his greatsword unexpectedly behind him. This lapse revealed the biggest vulnerability since their battle began. Had Ronyan not been pushed on the defensive this entire time, he might have suspected a trap. But seizing the rare opportunity that had come his way, he moved instinctively. Swoosh! Without giving Grill a chance to scream his last, his neck was severed cleanly. As the swordsman who had swung stood dumbfounded, something flew swiftly and embedded itself into the neckless body of Grill, now rolling on the ground with an indignant expression. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Arrows? Just as Ronyan noticed the unusually short arrows and turned his head, similar projectiles began pelting the knights around him. Ah! What is this? Everyone, watch your back! But they targeted only Teslan's knights. Although none achieved as dramatic a turnabout as Ronyan, the MacLine knights relieved sighs as the tide shifted. The maudlin atmosphere of the MacLine ranks was unexpectedly overturned. Ronyan could quickly discern that this sudden shift was thanks to a cavalry unit, dimly visible in the distance. And leading that unit was the unmistakable figure of someone familiar. Brother! Brother! His gaze lingered in stunned joy and bewilderment before an urgent cry brought Ronyan back to reality. Young lord, snap out of it. Let's join forces. Behind him, clashes with the enemy continued without respite. The ring of sharp metal and fierce shouts reminded him he was at the very heart of the battlefield. Yes, sir! Gripping his sword anew, Ronyan felt a fresh pang from the wounds on his hand. Strangely, it no longer seemed so painful. A sigh. Seems this is my limit after all. Logan exhaled, tinged with disappointment as he examined his crossbow. His force had evolved to become even more potent with a 2-star core, amplifying the weapon's elasticity beyond its previous capabilities. Hoping it might even be effective against knights, his expectations were soon tempered by reality. Initially dismayed, enemy knights quickly knocked aside bolts with ease, reaffirming the notion that without overwhelming numbers, ranged projectile weapons couldn't trouble them. At least I could aid Ronyan. Logan sighed in relief, watching knights protectively encircle Ronyan. Yet satisfaction eluded him. Protecting Ronyan alone wasn't the sole concern. I have to go myself. With a flash in his eye, Logan peered towards the heart of the battlefield and shouted over his shoulder. Kai! Take command! What? The battle still raged when Kai questioned, but Logan was already sprinting towards the front lines without waiting for an answer. Charge! Young Lord Logan! Kai exclaimed in alarm at Logan's impetuous act. A one-sided assault from a distance was the mercenaries' tactic, yet their leader was contrarily plunging headfirst towards the enemy. In Kai's eyes, it seemed their captain was contemplating suicide at the very brink of victory. Damn! Why? Kai was aware his employer had force abilities, but it seemed unlikely an individual of Logan's age could match a powerful knight in combat. Yet what was done, and the aftermath fell upon him. Cover for young Lord Logan. The advantage is ours. The mercenaries had executed flawlessly, achieving all their objectives. However, a vital issue persisted that could not be resolved by their deeds alone. My father! Oh, he must rescue his father, who in a past life had fallen victim to misfortune. After all, what was the point of his return if not to save his family, his house? Victory in war meant nothing if his family perished. Just a bit faster. And with fierce determination, Logan's force-enhanced steed raced across the battlefield like the wind. As he rapidly closed in on enemy lines, Logan noticed the befuddled enemy soldiers unprepared for his sudden charge. The mercenaries' skilled crossbow volleys had already sown chaos, but there remained those hell-bent on standing their ground. That man's their leader. If we take him down! The enemy, previously at the mercy of the mercenaries' bolts, now had one charging into range, spurred by desperation. Ha! As Logan swung his sword, a fuzzy shimmer of force erupted around him. Utilizing the force, he conjured a thin, albeit serviceable shield. Inferior to the magical shields of second circle mages he had witnessed in a past life, it was still sufficient to deflect ordinary archers' arrows. Fending off the few that pierced through, Logan continued his unrelenting advance. Instantly reaching the enemy's front, he swung his sword with might. Swoosh! Ah! In place of the 4 soldiers who lost their heads, their comrades screamed in terror. I'll kill them all! Responding to Logan's call, a fearful chorus resonated swiftly through the center of the battlefield. Monster! Everyone retreat! No, no! The emergence of a second Reaper deepened the disorder within Teslan's troops. Just a little faster. Just a bit more. Wah! As Logan cut down soldiers like wheat, he finally approached the site where knights fiercely clashed. Bang! Crash! Boom! Loud explosions resounded, and the knights, swift as lightning, entangled in combat with swords flashing. In the initial phase of war, lancers had charged the opposition, but most knights had since dismounted, choosing foot combat over horseback. In the complex fray of close-quarter knightly duels, horses proved irrelevant or worse, a disadvantage as they restricted movement. A force-wielding knight could maneuver at short range with greater speed and agility than on horseback. Observing the substantial number of Teslan knights, Logan gritted his teeth. Here I go! There was no time to fully test the limits of his 2-star core. All he knew was that his force could wield unprecedented power. With no room for hesitation, Logan charged. Ha! Winnie! As his force intensified into a golden hue, Logan leaped from his steed and directly into the melee. Teslan's knights were battering 2 of MacLaine's when the sudden neighing alerted the nearest enemy. Who's that? Zip. Before the question could finish, the knight's head was severed in disbelief. Through the blood spurting from the severed neck, a MacLaine knight gazed back in shocked relief. Behind. What? What? Noticing the turn of events, 2 Teslan knights reacted, but Logan's golden greatsword already swept through both without pause. Rip! Gush! Blood poured like a waterfall from the torso of one knight severed diagonally, and from another deep gash to the heart. Who are you? The dying knight's eyes brimmed with questions, but they faded before any answers could come. In that instant, another Teslan lost their heart to Logan's relentless blade. The scene Logan created stunned not just the enemy knights. Young Lord Logan? How could? Even experienced mid-rank knights could not exhibit such overpowering strength and movement. They stood wide-eyed and gaping in unseemly posture for a battlefield. Logan's explosive roar jolted them into action. Wake up and fight! His energy spurred the knights back into battle readiness. Once again wielding their swords, the knights surveyed their surroundings to join their embattled comrades, just as Logan resumed his headlong dash through the battlefield. Urgh! Argh! Watch your back! Logan didn't need to ensure each strike was lethal. The 2-star force core proved more potent than the average mid-rank knight. Now fully adaptive to his own strength, he focused less on killing and more on injuring enough to impair enemy movements, sufficiently aiding MacLaine's knights in gaining the upper hand. Young Lord Logan? The knights' unanimous shock wearied Logan. Ignoring their astonishment, he kept rushing in one direction. At the heart of the battlefield, 6 knights clashed. Having been the first to engage in combat, they continued a relentless exchange without respite. The space around them was sacred, untouched by any other. And as Logan drew closer, his golden form accelerated, shortening the space with great speed. Ronyan saw Logan's arrival but couldn't spare attention for the rear. Facing a high-grade knight and 4 mid-ranking knights alone was challenging enough for Patrick. At the sudden intensification of enemy attacks, appearing rushed and reckless, Patrick found the shift puzzling. Hurry! Alrune with the anxious cry from the Teslan high-grade knight, the enemy's assault grew bolder. Previously cautious, the Tesla Knights had switched from attempting to overpower Patrick with minimal loss to a brutal onslaught, seemingly willing to endure losses for his defeat. Damn! Patrick's actions grew more frantic. Clang! His sword flicked to the left and right, deflecting a pike and greatsword with minimal effort, bouncing off one to parry another. It was a masterful display of a high-grade knight, but evasion had its limits. Slash! A passing longsword nicked his forearm, leaving a slender yet lengthy wound. As Patrick flinched, the enemy closed in, prompting him to release a forceful sword strike. Crash! Ugh! The Tesla Knights recoiled from his powered blow, but the effort had bought Patrick precious time, or so he believed. Ugh! One soldier, blood trickling from his mouth, forced his way to close quarters. Teslin's high-grade knight, the very one who had troubled Patrick from the start, was faltering, his face paling noticeably with each forced breath. Attack! Ha! Two simultaneous cries, two swords stabbing in tandem. Thump. You madman! Heh, heh. The blades ran through each other's left side. One knight grimaced in pain, the other smirked with victory. Why take it this far? Beside Patrick, the great sword and pike descended. Ah, spurt. Clash. Retreating after pulling out the sword from his side, he watched the high-grade Teslan knight, too, making a move. Squeal. Ah! As Patrick staggered, clutching at his freshly opened wound, pike and longsword aimed for him anew. Gasp! The situation was dire, the worst since the battle began. Securing the rear with his swing, another knight leaped above, hoisting his great sword high, while one dove forward, pike ready to thrust. Behind them, despite spilling his own blood, the high-grade knight charged. Open, life-threatening blows seemingly reckless, not mindful of dangers behind. The display of such reckless bravado amidst advantageous odds baffled Patrick. Damned! Gritting his teeth, Patrick swung his sword, and into the fray of intertwined knights flashed a golden blaze. Boom! The loudest explosion since the war's onset resonated across the battlefield. Regressor of the Fallen Family. Chapter 26. In the heart of the collision. The shockwave that spread from the center of the collision upturned the ground, sending dirt and dust into the air. Ooh-ah! In the front lines, knights wielding a great sword and a spear were rolling on the ground, spurting blood in similar states. Before them stood a Teslan knight, a senior knight whose pallor had turned ashen as he steeled himself in front of them, while the knights with short spears and long swords who had rushed at Patrick's back were also pushed back, gasping for breath. Just in time, it seems. Logan. Patrick, who had been coughing up blood and sitting down, looked over at his eldest son, who had somehow appeared by his side with a shaky gaze. How did he make it here? He had seen the mercenary troop appear at the rear, but he had not anticipated seeing Logan here, at the heart of the battlefield. To come from the rear to here. Instinctively, Patrick turned his head, and in his peripheral vision, he witnessed an incredible scene. Enemy lines that seemed pierced in a straight line, as if by a monstrous charge, and bodies strewn on both sides. Among the corpses were not only soldiers, but also many of the Teslan knights. The gazes of those who remained were uniformly fixed on Logan. In the eyes of his allies, there was admiration. In the eyes of his enemies, tangible fear. It was then that Patrick finally sensed a shift in the atmosphere of the battlefield. His son's presence here was no fluke or coincidence. And had he not seen with his own eyes? How Logan had deflected an attack aimed at him. When did he become so strong? No, that's not what's important right now. Patrick grimaced, pushing himself up. I'm not sure how the battle is going. With a pale complexion, Patrick stood and grasped Logan's shoulder. Your presence here means the tide is in our favor, right? That question stemmed more from hope than from a cool assessment of the situation. Fortunately, Logan had the response his father's intense gaze was hoping for. Yes, good, well done. Patting his son's shoulder, Patrick's touch felt reassuring. To Logan, his father's awkward words and actions were unexpectedly heartwarming. Sir Raoul, a senior Teslan knight, gripped his trembling hand and forced himself to maintain composure. The internal injuries from blocking Patrick's lance charge, along with the wound in his side, were getting progressively worse, but there was no time to attend to them. Rick Stromble, get ready, quickly! His growling voice focused the attention of his two subordinates who were spitting blood at the edge of their mouths. Patrick MacLine was no longer a big concern. He was more wounded than Raoul from the collisions and cumulative damage. There's no time. You four, take that man. I'll handle the Baron. What mattered was the assailant who, with a single stroke, had deflected the combined attacks of Pannon and Ramston, knights who had rushed at Patrick's rear. Even more baffling was that the enemy seemed hardly in his county 20s, a young man reaching the ridiculous extremes. Does that even make sense? A man in his county 20s deflecting the simultaneous attacks of 2 intermediate grade knights when Raoul was that age. 20-odd years ago, he recalled the days spent toiling to become a knight, spinning his head to discard the distracting thoughts. None of that mattered anymore. This man will die here. A lowly burst of jealousy unconsciously turned into a murderous intent that exploded. However, Patrick scoffed at his enemies, who were emanating killing intent. Of course, his injuries were not light. His left side was soaked with blood, and with each breath the pain was sharp, and the taste of blood continually rose in his mouth. Yet even if his opponent was less injured, he was confident in his superior skill. Moreover, his son had shown a force far surpassing that of an intermediate grade knight. How he had improved so much in such a short time was beyond him. He might not yet be senior ranked, but average intermediate grade knights couldn't handle Logan, and certainly not 4 mid-rank knights who were already gravely injured. Patrick was sure of this as he took a step forward, but Logan blocked him. His son's thinking was different. I'll take care of him. No, it's too risky. Patrick's voice was firm as he held back his son. Even if Logan had grown, his capabilities' limits were clear in Patrick's eyes. Logan may have looked outstanding among intermediate grade knights, but he was not yet at the senior level. Even if the man was injured, Logan couldn't possibly face the enemy's senior knight. At least I am in better shape than you are now, father. Gently pressing, cough. Patrick, caught off guard, forgot his dignity as he groaned in pain. At your current condition, I can even defeat you. Trust me, and let me handle this. Logan's eyes burned with intensity, showing no signs of backing down. All right. There was no time to argue stubbornly. As Patrick stepped back, he quickly ran calculations. Even if they were mere remnants, 4 intermediate grade knights, but they were also wounded. Patrick, in his current condition, might not be less injured, but there was an essential disparity they could not overcome. I'll finish first and then help Logan. The direction was opposite to what he had initially planned, but it seemed like a not-so-bad alternative. Be careful, son. Remember, until the war is over, I am not your child. Let's hurry and finish this, my lord. A joke that didn't fit the situation, yet Logan smirked and drew his sword. Patrick, in turn, let out a hollow laugh and, holding his sword up, stood back to back with his son. It was a feeling of reassurance beyond imagination that was transmitted through his back, feeling even the pain in his side lessen a bit. Let's finish this quickly. Father and son wielded their swords, facing their enemies on both sides. How dare this whelp? Raoul's eyes narrowed as he faced the charging opponent. Surprisingly, it wasn't the Baron, but that young man in front of him. The force that had blown away the intermediate grade knight was certainly useful, but he was not a match for himself. Raoul was also at the senior level, and even his mere presence could be intimidating. A mid-ranking force user at best. He has superior physical abilities, but he was not a match for Raoul, a senior-ranked knight. But during the clash, the moment his red blade crossed with the enemy's golden sword, boom, cough, coup. The one who was pushed back further was him. What? This was unfathomable. The difference in levels was not merely about strength and speed. Even with the same power, the efficiency in harnessing it and the sheer force it could bring to bear was precisely the difference in level. Even accounting for his own injuries, considering the enemy's strength and level, the young man was not someone who was a match for him. The kid must have pushed himself too hard. That was the only conclusion Raoul could accept. He gathered his strength for the next clash. Boom! But as their swords crossed, the shock along with the surging blood indicated his inner organs had been hit hard. However, Raoul, pushed back by the recoil while smirking bitterly at the whelp, couldn't afford to show weakness. Swallowing hard, the forcefully ingested blood aggravated his internal wounds. But there was no time to tend to them. If you push yourself, I'll push too. Eventually, the difference in levels would define the difference in outcome. With clenched teeth, Raoul gathered all his power, not caring about what laid behind him. But cling, scrape. The enemy's deflected sword quickly redirected and etched a long gash on his thigh. Accepting the grim reality, Raoul realized that his strength was decreasing while the enemy was becoming even faster and stronger. Eek! Despite recognizing the grim reality, the frustration was overwhelming. If not for the injury, he wouldn't have suffered such humiliation. But Raoul was not one to give up without a fight, so he changed his tactic. It's not all about strength and speed. He had wielded a sword for longer than the whelp had been alive. His only way out of this crisis was to capitalize on the difference in their swordsmanship. From that point, he avoided clashing swords as much as possible, relinquishing his pride as a senior knight, and deftly luring for an opening with minimal movements. Cling! Whoosh! With a light flick of his wrist, he changed the direction of his blade, tirelessly exploiting any weakness. However, in a battle of force users, it was impossible to completely avoid collisions, and the internal damage worsened, pushing him further into a defensive state. Yet Raoul held back, waiting for the right moment. Observed by the prospect that a simple deflection was intended, a gold shine intensified on the boy's blade, indicating his intent to smash the technique with brute force. A smile curled at the corner of Raoul's mouth. This was what he'd been waiting for. The red glow around Raoul's sword deepened for a moment. Ugh! Using the force, Raoul pulled the enemy's blade toward him, surging forward, using his opponent's primed strength to disrupt the balance, feeling the stagger. It's done! The center was compromised, the sword thrust forward. With full understanding of the enemy's condition, Raoul launched his decisive strike. Scrape! A clean slicing sound, but Raoul's expression stiffened in despair. Just the hem of the robe? Through the battle, he had slowed more than he realized, while the enemy had sped up. Overlooking this difference was Raoul's fatal mistake. Having shown a brief look of surprise, the enemy now laughed ferociously and resumed his offensive. Curse it! Raoul cursed his missed chance, but it was too soon to despair. The swords clashed again, and he gritted his teeth, employing the same tactic once more. However, the opponent was not naive enough to fall for the same trick twice. Die! With a ferocious smile, the enemy's sword burst with a golden shine. Feeling the danger, Raoul hastily retreated. He quickly moved away from the reach of the blade, but it was futile. The swung enemy blade released 4 layers of gold waves that enveloped Raoul. Impossible! Quadruple wave. The first technique of the divine swordsmanship. An ancient secret technique that appeared in the world for the first time in 1,000 years unleashed its full power. A senior knight using tricks, huh? Staggering for a moment and then spitting out disdainfully, Logan raised his sword again. Then, he severed the head from the nearly crushed corpse and impaled it on his blade. I, Logan MacLine, have killed the enemy commander. Even as Patrick hadn't yet finished his battle with the intermediate grade knights, the proclamation that echoed across the battlefield decided the outcome of the war. At the moment when Logan's declaration sounded across the battlefield, fissures erupted within Teslan's last standing forces. But within those fissures was a grave misconception. The Count is dead? No way. It can't be. Now that I think of it, the flag has been missing for a while. The Count's choice to lower the flag and hide in unfavorable moments had bizarrely backfired. Logan's action, thinking decapitating a senior knight was enough, had unexpectedly engendered an even more dramatic effect. Let's surrender! Are you crazy? We need to save our skins. Faced with the increasingly dire situation, even the most loyal soldiers who hadn't fled and fought to the end became chaotic as their focus of loyalty vanished. Let's surrender! Don't attack! More than half of the remaining Teslan forces, numbering less than 3,000, declared their surrender on the spot, dropping to their knees. The first to feel the impact were the MacLine soldiers who had been fighting against them, as the persistent enemies finally laid down their arms. Caught in the battle's frenzy, or perhaps in fear, they had to acknowledge the changed situation. And amid them, with the loudest voice, was none other than Patrick. Long live young Lord Logan. 1,000 cheers for the young lord. While Patrick's behavior was perhaps overly excessive, as he even shed tears while shouting, many among those relieved to have saved their skin joined in his cries. Long live Logan MacLine! Huzzah for our young lord! The battle isn't over yet, you fools! Indeed, voices grounded in reality did attempt to awaken them, but the remaining enemy force had already lost its will to fight, only afraid to drop their weapons lest they be killed. However, the reactions of the few surviving strong ones, the knights, were a bit different. Regressor of the Fallen Family. Chapter 27. The Count is still alive. Escape. We must escape and find the Count. The death of senior knight Raoul came as a severe shock, not only to the ordinary soldiers, but also to the Teslan knights. However, the duty to protect their lord was a stronger call for them. The remaining Teslan knights began to band together to escape. Of course, the MacLine forces and Logan had no intention of letting them go. Surrender! Surrender or face death. Logan's voice, once again booming with recovered strength, now carried the overwhelming momentum of the battlefield, Yet despite witnessing his prowess and the victories he had achieved, there were those who could not accept reality. "Don't make me laugh, boy!" A Teslan knight, towering at almost 2 meters, charged forward like lightning, swinging a two-handed sword. His attack was not only swift, unbefitting his large size, but also retained its powerful force. He unleashed a perfect slash, utilizing the advantages of his great stature and longsword. But, screech. The one cleaved was, in fact, the knight himself. Thud. "If you at least want to leave a proper corpse, surrender." Logan, covered in the splattered blood of his bisected foe, bared his teeth as he bellowed once more. His blood-stained form only amplified the dominating effect he had on the battlefield. "The young lord has cut down a knight in a single stroke." Did the young lord really possess such skill? Logan's feats had surprised even his allied knights, let alone the Teslan knights who felt an immense wave of pressure. Damn! Could he be high grade? That damn monster! Where did he come from? Are we doomed then? Logan, with his chilling appearance drenched in blood, charged forward leading the MacLine knights and soldiers, while among them, Patrick revealed his resilience by dealing with 4 middle-ranking knights despite his severe wounds. Only after 9 stubbornly resisting knights fell did the remaining 32 Teslan knights surrender. Where's the Count of Teslan? He seems to have fled. Is that so? Ha, but his destinations are limited. Logan observed his father sprinkling potion on his wounds, seated on the ground without even the comfort of a tent. His gaze was complicated. "Are you all right?" "Of course, I'm fine. I couldn't be better." "I'm relieved to hear that." "Well, there's much I'd like to ask you, but let's save that for after the war." Sensing his father's will, Logan silently nodded. "Good. Let's go finish this war." His voice carrying a cheerful energy was a clear indication that he was feeling at ease. "Prepare the knights. We'll head straight for the Teslan castle." Patrick's appearance was truly valiant, but this was not what Logan had hoped for. That would be problematic. Anticipating his father's response, Logan had prepared his words in advance. "Please don't overexert yourself. Ensure that your wounds are fully healed. I will lead the mercenaries first towards the Teslan's main stronghold and end this war." Fortunately, his father did not catch the nuance hidden between the lines of Logan's speech. Yes, go ahead with that." His father simply nodded with an easily granted acceptance. Then, feeling inexplicably hurried, Logan nodded and turned around. "Logan!" At that moment, his father, who had slumped back to his seat, called him in a soft voice. "Yes?" As Logan turned back, Patrick, who met his eyes, seemed about to say something, but instead simply waved his hand. "No, it's nothing. You may go." Despite his father's demeanor eliciting a curious tilt of Logan's head, he turned back. "Thank you," with a startle. The voice was so small it was a wonder if someone right beside him could have heard it. But it was heard clearly by Logan, whose senses had been transcended due to the Force core. A strange warmth tinged with emotion tapped at his heart. A part of the regret from his past life seemed to dissolve with it. "No, I was the one who should apologize." Logan bowed his head at the remembrance of his previous life's failings, yet strangely a smile crossed his face. It was a new feeling when recalling his former existence. Despite its odd dissonance, it wasn't an unpleasant sensation. He had much he wanted to say, but the words never quite made it past his lips. "I'll be back." All that came out was a voice hardly louder than his father's. On the road chasing after Teslan. At the front of the march, Logan's lips carried a slightly contented smile. A solitary warhorse charged across the open field. "Yeah!" Reflecting the rider's anxious heart, he spurred the weary horse relentlessly. Where did it all go wrong? The visage of the rider, Haemon Teslan, was contorted with confusion. I had prepared everything perfectly. He had spent a full 3 years preparing, enhancing the soldiers' equipment, and not only regularly training the official troops, but also the conscripts. To expand his knight order from 70 to 100 men, he had even reached out to other nobles. Moreover, Raoul, the head of the knight order, had recently risen to become a senior knight. A fortunate twist. With Raoul's new strength confirmed, Haemon had devised this plan for territory war, assured of victory. Yet unforeseen foes had appeared, turning all plans to dust. Those bastards! That cavalry ruined everything, especially those weapons. The relentless bolts of death from the unprecedented crossbows were virtually impossible to counter from such distances. A weapon so overpowered that, even had they been aware, marshalling the Knight Order would be the only conceivable response. Even so, would we have been able to stop them? As he fled the battlefield in the garb of an ordinary soldier, he saw the red-haired man cleaving through soldiers, effortlessly beheading a knight. The man at the forefront of the cavalry bearing crossbows was unmistakably the one. If that man possessed such ferocity, maybe others did too. "No, that's impossible!" Haman scoffed, repelling the ominous thoughts with a shake of his head. The red-headed man had to be Patrick's son. It was improbable that such a monstrous individual was common. Nevertheless, this was no longer of importance. The war he had staked everything on was lost, and his ambitions had crumbled. But things had not yet reached their end. If I can just get there, I can survive. With that information, if I make good use of it... Haman continued his relentless urge toward Teslan Castle. Whether by fortune or misfortune, just as the horse neared the castle gates, it collapsed and vomited blood. "Haman!" Thud. Barely averting a tumble, Haman dismounted and yelled up at the walls. "Open the gate! Your lord has returned!" Though wearing a simple soldier's attire, luckily one of the gatekeepers recognized him. Barely entering through the opening gate, an urgent shout arose. "Look, something's approaching! Looks like a cavalry." With the soldier's words echoing, Haman felt a chill dawn upon him. Close the gates. Defend. At all costs. What? He knew well it was an impossible demand for the few dozen soldiers guarding the gate. Yet he could give no other command. Don't let anyone through. Leaving behind frantic declarations, he dashed toward the inner keep. "Hurry! Gather anything of value! Belua! Where's Belua? Prepare to flee at once!" Bursting into the inner keep, Haman's screams had the urgency of a death knell. The perplexed looks of the servants he dismissed with irritation as he hurried to his office. He had fled the battlefield without rest, yet the enemy was already at his heels. The chill of death's scythe seemed to graze the back of his neck. That haunting presence spurred him on as he dashed into his office and slammed the door shut. Immediately he found his secret space, opening the safe. I must take the gold, at least. It's the only way. Haman frantically swept the last remnants of his life's fortunes into a shabby bag. At that moment, a breathless servant burst in to deliver dire news. The gate has been breached. The grim proclamation drained all color from Haman's face. The distance between the battlefield and Teslan Castle, even when riding non-stop on horseback, was over 5 hours. They had ridden relentlessly without even the briefest respite for the horses, and had only managed to catch mere glimpses of the enemy's rear. The man who slipped into the closing gate wore ragged clothing, but an ordinary soldier would surely not receive such respectful treatment by another. He fled quite fast indeed. Logan's brows furrowed, but his command did not waver. Take Teslan Castle and capture the Count. Yes. The troops visible atop the fortifications barely numbered 100. Clearly, Teslan's territory had nearly emptied its forces for the battle. For this reason, directing a siege assault with merely 300 men met no opposition. Taking the lead, Logan charged toward the castle. Teslan has been defeated. Open your gates and welcome the rightful victors. His shout resounded across the plains, reaching the ears of the Teslan soldiers huddled on the ramparts, causing them to flinch at the sight. As Logan surged forward, a mere few arrows flew out, not warranting any covering fire from his mercenaries. Thus Logan reached the gate's forefront, kicked off from his horse, and leaped into the air. Discarding the heavy armor rent asunder by the enemy's senior knight and donning lighter leather armor made his movements easy. Enhanced by his physical might and the power of the force, he easily scaled the wall, reaching the top. Open the gate, if you don't wish to die. Before they knew it, the Teslan commander's neck was at Logan's sword point. Just that alone was more than enough to open the gates of Teslan Castle. Move! Find Haman Teslan! Locating the Count was effortless. Before Logan could even brandish his sword, servile hands pointed him in the right direction. And then, arriving at the inner keep, a servant subtly indicated a gap in the bookshelf, leading Logan to spot the Count, practically adhered to the wall in hiding. Hayak! Haman Teslan shook like a ghost had accosted him, having long discarded any semblance of a noble's dignity. Finally caught you, crunch. Logan ground his teeth, infusing his current and past life's regrets. This bastard single-handedly brought doom to my house in my past life. As he approached with rising anger, the moment arrived. I surrender. I'll compensate in whatever manner necessary according to the laws of territory war. Spare my life and my family's, I beg you. Haman's sudden shift in demeanor was striking, immediately dropping to his knees. In accordance with the law? Logan almost laughed at the absurdity. First, you declare war on your own terms, invading after just a day, and now you speak of laws and customs to us. Haman Teslan, do you even have a shred of conscience? Thud. The once dignified Count now sat collapsed on the floor. As Logan casually walked toward him, step. The increasing panic in Haman magnified. Honor among nobility. The tradition of territory war grants prisoners their lives. Honor among nobility. Right. Our MacLine house respects honor, so we shall conform to these customs. Thus, your life, Haman Teslan, shall be spared, and you'll have time to gather a modest sum and your family before you leave. The thank you. Haman sighed in relief, but Logan's malice didn't wane. Why do you look at me with those eyes? Truly, my father would have said this. He would have accepted your surrender even without conditions because he cherishes honor above all else. Ah! As Logan took another step forward, Haman, sensing impending doom, screeched and scurried backward in terror. Ignoring him, Logan took a beautifully jeweled dagger from the wide-open safe. It's a nice blade. To take it. It's crafted by Safina, the kingdom's finest artisan. Haman babbled ceaselessly, overtaken by a suffocating fear, but Logan just slowly shook his head. No, this shall stay with you. What? Here! Shh! Logan smoothly drew the dagger, its sharp edge gleaming. He forcibly placed it in Haman's trembling hand. With a bright smile, Logan watched the panic in Haman's eyes, and whoosh. Cough. Logan moved the clenched hand of Haman and thrust the dagger into his spine. Cough. Please, spare me. If it were my father, he would have spared you. Groan. The dagger embedded in the spine ignored the instinctive resistance of the man, gradually descending downward. Sorry, but I'm not him. Looking at the contorted face of the man, Logan chuckled ruthlessly. I could easily stab you in the heart in one breath, but he didn't have the intention to kill that easily. With a cold gaze, he added force to the blade. Coup. The honor of nobility. Ha! Do you know how many have died because of your greed? The honor of nobility? What about human conscience? Regardless of the grudges from past lives, numerous innocent people had died in this war. That miserable life ends right here. Crack. As his belly completely split open, organs spilled out. The contorted face of the man, on the verge of spewing blood, couldn't even scream. With a wide-open mouth, eyes that seemed ready to pop out at any moment, and a trembling body, the man, clearly experiencing extreme agony, quickly met his end. Consider yourself fortunate that you can die so easily. If he had been caught running away in the fields outside instead of in his study, Logan would have killed him much more brutally, amid agonizing pain. However, many had witnessed him entering the study. Dealing with this matter was merely bothersome due to the tradition he mentioned. Perhaps having heard Logan's words, the slightly widened eyes became even larger, and when his pitiful breath ceased, Logan wore a bright smile. It wasn't about deriving pleasure from the enemy's suffering. It was merely the sense of accomplishment that he had finally overcome a major hurdle. Finally. It was just the satisfaction of having surpassed the crisis facing the family. I need to handle the aftermath. With a proud feeling, Logan erased the smile from his face and shouted towards the outside. Haman Teslan has committed suicide. His voice echoed throughout the castle, creating a significant resonance. Disheartened by the defeat in the war, Haman Teslan took advantage of a moment when the surveillance was lax and cut his own belly. Despite Logan, the young lord, trying to save him, by the time the priests arrived, he had already taken his last breath. Many were puzzled by the rumors, but no one dared to question Logan about the truth. With this, the Teslan castle was completely engulfed by the MacLine. Regressor of the Fallen Family. Chapter 28. The main force and the head of the house, Patrick MacLine, arrive at Teslan Castle. It was 2 days later that the main force of the MacLine family and the head of the family, Patrick MacLine, arrived at Teslan Castle. Upon his arrival, Patrick immediately heard about the matters Logan had taken care of and called him over without delay. Haman committed suicide? His tone was laced with disbelief, as if he had heard something utterly preposterous. Yet Logan looked brazenly at his father. Yes, it seems he was overwhelmed with despair. Did you kill him? On the defensive. No. Seeing his son's eyes wandering off distantly, Patrick let out a long sigh. Ha! And of course his sons all happened to die in a duel with you? They challenged me to a duel for insulting me without knowing their place. Had the dead ones, who pleaded in a voice begging for noble treatment, heard this, they would have turned in their graves. Is this an issue for a Force user against a commoner? Honor has nothing to do with the Force. Ugh, Logan, you can tell me the truth. After groans as if suppressing a tumult of thoughts and a long sigh, Patrick looked at the changed expression in his son's eyes, and Logan calmly revealed the real reason. Yes, I killed them on purpose. Why? The Teslan territory must once again fall under our MacLine control. I did not wish to keep the bloodline alive and leave room for discord. Didn't you ever think about keeping them alive and using them as subjects? Yes. Patrick frowned for a moment at Logan's terse reply. However, he did not admonish or rage as he had done before. Through the recent war, he had clearly come to realize that his eldest son had grown out of his reach and was of age to have his own thoughts. His methods might be excessive, but he must have had his reasons. The change in his thoughts was truly inconceivable compared to a few days ago. Despite the cold shoulder and the disregard, the son who protected the family was worthy of such trust. Now there were more pressing matters at hand than to brood over such trivial problems. Huh. A long sigh was all that could replace the words of disappointment unspoken. All right, I understand. Go inside. Any other matters? I have gathered all the valuables, including jewelry, in one place. As for other matters, I have instructed Teslan's administrators to prepare a report. The administrators? 12 in total. I didn't bother with the administrative managers that we might need. Good, well done. The Baron and his son, the leaders of the invasion, entered the Great Hall of Teslan Castle to review their accomplishments. The MacLane's forces returned to their home castle a mere week after the war had begun. The actual war had ended in just one day, so the time taken to travel to and from Teslan territory was effectively the entire duration of the conflict. Nevertheless, the territory's people cheered for the returning soldiers, as if hailing war heroes who had come back after several years. Long live the MacLine family! Long live Patrick MacLine! Endless cheers arose from people embracing their safely returned heads of families or sons, tears of joy streaming down their faces. Given that the war had started from a place of despair, the taste of victory was all the sweeter. Amongst these cheers, a dissonant cry of celebration reached Logan's ears. Long live young Lord Logan! Startled by the unexpected cheers, Logan waved his hand in surprise. It's only been a few days. He was a little taken aback by the rapid changes, but rumors had already spread far and wide. Young Lord Logan had made the greatest contribution in the war. Initially, many didn't believe it, but the testimonies from their returning families only amplified the rumors. The bad talk that had built up around Logan gradually faded away, replaced by accolades that even he found embarrassing. Genius, insight, and astonishing martial might, a talent unmatched in the world. Past rumors about his eccentric behavior were now understood as quirks of a misunderstood genius, and the rumors of his former misdeeds were absurdly repackaged, as Logan having acted to hide his own brilliance. During the triumphant parade, Logan's face turned red as he heard these ridiculously fabricated praises. Brother, how does it feel? Everyone is praising you. Praise? What nonsense. My face feels like it's on fire. You should moderate too, Ronyan. His words were sincere. After all, the credits he gained were based almost solely on his knowledge of the future. To have all of them attributed to his innate talent made even someone as thick-skinned as him slightly embarrassed. But Logan couldn't help but smile with genuine satisfaction for a reason of his own. I always knew you would accomplish great things, young Lord Logan. From a soldier to a personal attendant, Rick, it's as if young Lord Logan himself claimed victory. The head of the knightly order, Heinkel, who was usually so laconic. That's right, young Lord Logan. This victory belongs to you. None of the knights nearby refuted the overly enthusiastic praise. A life of being pointed at and chased away in his previous life, and his once collapsed family. The two pains from his past were resolved. His heart felt lighter, and restraining the pride that naturally swelled appeared challenging. Calm down, stay composed. The future is even more. Even as he tried to reassure himself, the delighted smile on Logan's face was beyond his control. Show everyone who truly earned the greatest merit in this war. Wow. At the shout of one of the knights, the others flocked toward Logan. Then the celebratory tossing began. Long live young Lord Logan. Hooray! Cheers echoed to the sky, and amidst the pleasant gaze of the territory's people, a delighted, unrestrained laugh burst from Logan. Ha 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 ha. After the boisterous welcoming ceremony had concluded, the key figures of the territory gathered in the meeting room. Heinkel alone represented the knights in place of the 5 commanders left to temporarily manage the Teslon territory. Dwayne, the financial officer among the 5 administrators, was also in attendance. Then there were the people of the MacLine family. Excluding Marianne with her dismal expression, everyone in the upbeat atmosphere listened as Patrick proclaimed, "Let us now begin honoring those who contributed to the campaign. Dwayne." "Yes, I will report the outcomes." Dwayne reported the spoils of war with a poised voice. The remaining funds of the Teslon territory amounted to 4.32 million gold, about 1 million gold's worth of jewelry, and grains worth an estimated 300,000 gold. Not to mention Teslon Castle and the territory, nearly 500 hectares, 5 kilometers of plains. This was the massive tangible gain the MacLine family had procured from the war. That's all. Whoa! Cheers erupted as Dwayne finished speaking. It seems the Teslon family had much more money than we had anticipated. With satisfaction at Dwayne's additional remarks, Patrick continued calmly. Everyone has worked hard. Now let's decide on the rewards. First, the merits of the knights were discussed. Since they were the clan's primary force, rewarding them was expected. However, what was surprising was that even the administrative officers who didn't participate in the battle received some compensation. This was to foster a sense of unity among the clan members, but also as a preemptive reward for the enormous post-war administrative work they would undertake. Nevertheless, none of these rewards compared to the gains they had secured. Although Heinkel's reward of 50,000 gold seemed considerably large, the total rewards for everyone did not exceed 500,000 gold. Considering the resources expended during the war and the future expenditures, this was a small sum. War consumes resources, it does not create them. Considering the budget required for Teslon Castle alone, they might be short of funds until the autumn harvest, or maybe even until next year. At least everyone gathered there recognized this. Once those minor rewards were settled, the actual purpose of the meeting unfolded. Everyone here is aware that this war was not won by the strength of the knights or me, but by the strength of another. Despite the absence of any direct mention, everyone's gaze shifted to one person. The eyes of Heinkel and others who had been on the battlefield were full of goodwill, while the looks from the managers who stayed behind still harbored doubt. Really? Did that young lord actually change the course of the war? Despite the obvious distrust, the atmosphere did not allow for argument. Complicated gazes fixed on Logan, while he himself appeared unfazed. His mind was preoccupied with something he planned to do after the meeting. But even he was taken aback by the next words from Patrick. The greatest contributor to this war, the first in merit, is no one else but my son Logan. I would like to bestow upon him a reward of 300,000 gold. It may have seemed small, but it was an enormous sum, comparable to the entire knightly order's reward. Given the current situation of the MacLine family, it was a massive expenditure. Moreover, as the primary heir of the MacLine family, recognizing his legitimate lineage and merits, I hereby declare Logan MacLine as the official successor to the family. The conversation then unexpectedly turned to matters of succession. Caught off guard by the sudden announcement, the individuals in the meeting room showed various reactions. Young Lord Logan, congratulations. While Heinkel sent out applause with a radiant face, the administrators looked around at each other, emotions mixed. Dwayne cautiously interjected, Lord, perhaps the decision on a successor should be more carefully considered. Ah, come now. You're saying that because you didn't see the young lord on the battlefield. No, even so, based on just one aspect. As Dwayne and Heinkel, representing the knights, started to raise their voices against each other. Excuse me, but I would like to decline the discussion about the successor for now. The calm-faced main party threw in his piece. What? Did I hear wrongly? Did he just decline the succession? Repeating these confused whispers, Patrick, his expression stiffened slightly, asked again, Why? Surely you don't still hold a grudge over the previous events? He couldn't help but recall the happenings just before the war at Logan's coming-of-age ceremony. However, amidst the puzzlement of the lords who were clueless about the reason, Logan shook his head calmly. It's not for that reason. Then, as I mentioned before, the MacLine line is a family of warriors, and my brother Ronyan, with his genius in martial arts, suits the role of successor far better than I do. Brother? Ronyan exclaimed, and Marianne, who had been downcast, looked up sharply. However, the majority of the listeners seemed incredulous at Logan's words. One must consider how many knights Logan had killed in this war. Among them was even a superior knight. Even if that knight had been injured, for someone to have taken a superior knight's life at the mere age of 20, if not a genius, then who was? Regardless of how it might have changed the expressions of his listeners, Logan continued unperturbed. Ronian became a Force user at just 14 years old. That's a full 5 years ahead of me. No one knows what achievements he may reach by the time he comes of age. You're saying if that happens, mere strength would not be enough for one to become the head of a family, Logan. No, it will. As his father gave the predictable response, Logan inwardly smirked. If Ronian were to become recognized as the youngest aura user on the continent, as in his previous life, any downside would be irrelevant. Of course, the immediate reason was not that, but something else entirely. I don't need to be a successor. More precisely, it was more advantageous not to be tied down as a successor. The minute he assumed a title, people would pay more attention to his safety, and the so-called successor training, wrapped up in papers and documents, would waste plenty of his time. If possible, he would have liked to establish Ronian as the successor immediately, but that was not feasible yet. At least as a brother, I want to give my sibling a chance. I request that the successor selection be postponed until Ronian comes of age, 5 years from now. Thus, this was the best Logan could do at the moment. Brother. He avoided looking at Ronian's troubled expression or his stepmother's face. Fortunately, his response seemed to impress his father and the lords. Indeed. To think the young lord has changed. Impressive. Even the administrators, once skeptical while discussing meritorious deeds, gazed at Logan with admiration following his remarks. Heinkel, in particular, nodded his head with a look of immense pride. Moved by that warm atmosphere, Patrick responded with a smile. Your thoughts aren't bad. I will accept your will and postpone the decision on a successor for 5 years until after Ronian's coming of age. Thank you. And before the smile could fade away, Logan dropped another bombshell. I would also like to decline the reward.
Chapter 29. What? At Logan's words, everyone was startled once again. Logan's image had changed drastically due to the recent war, but the majority of those present remembered his behavior during the past broken engagement incident. Logan's reputation for loving money had not changed. I don't mean to say I won't take a reward, I just mean I won't take it in money. Upon hearing that, everyone nodded as if they expected such a statement, but they were once again astonished by his next request. Instead of money, I would like to request land. Are you saying you want to create private land within the territory? The expression of Patrick, who had been infinitely amiable, stiffened slightly. However, Logan remained unfazed. Yes, heavens! With a deep sigh from Patrick, the administrators protested vehemently. That's preposterous. Private land within our territory? No matter how great the young lord's achievements are, granting land is unheard of in this small territory. That sort of thing would only have been possible in the days of the old countdom. Some even invoked taboo words, receiving scowls from the others. Yet, even if it was a conversation that would have been disregarded as worthless in the past, Patrick calmed the assembly first. Let's just ask for now, why do you suddenly want land? Feeling anew the change in his reputation, Logan smiled and continued his explanation. I am aware that the territory still needs a lot of money. Use that money for the territory. I'll take one of the mountains in the western wastelands to develop. The wastelands? A wild mountain? Yes, just one of the mountains near the border with the Teslon territory, along the river will suffice. To every direction, the desolate MacLine territory was the most useless, second only to the south with its abundance of monsters. Although called a mountain, it was a barren land so desolate that even finding a few trees was a challenge. Why that place? What's there? What could possibly be there? But why? The administrators were naturally bewildered, and Patrick was no different. You want to develop that land? Who knows? Maybe there's gold buried deep in the ground. Logan's off-the-wall comment left everyone looking at him in incredulity. The royal family has already developed all the gold mines. Never mind. You just want that land. Is that it? Frayed by the conversation, the lord of the house grasped his head, and Logan readily nodded. Yes. At that response, the vassals shook their heads disapprovingly. To them, it was merely another incomprehensible act of the young lord. Everyone gathered began to think similarly. After all, if it's useless land, letting the young lord have it and saving the budget wasn't a bad idea. Fine. Grant the wild mountain to Logan. Dwayne, bring the map. Show me precisely where. Yes, we'll grant this mountain as private property. Thanks to this, the opposition disappeared, and permission was granted all too easily. It's done! Logan clenched his fists secretly under the conference room table. This land is far more important than the mere 300,000 gold. His heart raced with elation at having overcome the hurdle of the provincial war, and pride swelled his soul, but he couldn't afford to rest on his laurels. 9 years from now, the thought alone was suffocating, recalling the calamity that would strike. A noble house on the fringes of the kingdom, and he, merely one of its sons, had to become the pivotal factor in repelling the Imperial invasion. And there were also the internal calamities of the kingdom yet to come. There's still a long way to go. Both he and his house had many mountains left to climb. This decision, too, was meant to proactively overcome those disasters. It's better for me to have it than the house if we're to respond effectively in the future. The meeting soon ended, and Logan had obtained everything he desired. Having left the conference room, Logan immediately confronted another burden that had been weighing on his mind for a long time. And as always, this burden turned its edge on him. What in the world are you thinking? Mother! What kind of scheme is this? Others may be fooled, but do you think you can deceive your own mother? Even Ronyan's remonstrations couldn't stop the new mother from yelling, her eyes bloodshot and complexion pale, now deserving pity. Mother, please! Brother, I'm sorry. My mother is heartbroken over the matters of the maternal family right now. It's okay, Ronyan. It's all right. Logan smiled gently at his flustered brother, then turned back to the new mother. Regardless of long-standing grudges, she was now no more than a powerless matriarch. No longer could she pose any threat or interruption to him. And precisely because of this, the timing was right to amend this twisted relationship. Maybe now is the time for a sincere apology rather than excuses. While Logan was not without reservation, he was undaunted. He took a deep breath, sorted his thoughts, and spoke calmly. Mother, I understand that the behavior I have shown over the years does not inspire trust. The actions I took, wrapped up in jealousy and an inferiority complex, I regret them profoundly. See, Ronian, he admits it himself. Everything was his doing. Mother, please stop! Ronian clutched at Marianne's waist with a sorrowful gaze. Brother, Mother is not herself right now. Now is not the time for such conversations. Just listen, Logan MacLine. Truth is, you're the one I truly owe an apology. Yes, I've apologized since my return, but I never told you for what. Even decades of regret couldn't overcome my cowardice. Brother, facing words incomprehensible to Ronian, whose expression became vacant. But you knew it, Ronian, you're no fool. And the outright confession that followed made Ronian's face harden like stone. For the past few years, I despised you. Marianne was speechless, and Ronian paled at the unembellished revelation. Logan could only smile bitterly at that sight. By hating you, I tried to evade my own failings. Now I sincerely regret that pathetic period, Ronian. Logan forced himself to look directly into his brother's eyes. Ronian, my brother, I apologize now however late it is. I was truly sorry. The new mother's eyes widened with astonishment, and Ronian was too flustered to even look properly. Just speaking the words brought a surge of emotion that had been held back for decades. Having returned to the past and overcoming one crisis of the house, Logan finally mustered the courage to apologize sincerely. One cannot cover wrongdoing with right doing. Logan MacLine, you're still immature. Despite feeling relieved, he couldn't help but laugh self-mockingly. It's okay, brother. His brother, who had seemed stiff for a moment, soon smiled brightly. I was fine even back then. What? Those were words Logan had never imagined in this life or the last. If I did well, I believed one day you would return as the brother I knew. And you have. Haha. Laughing at the sight of his smiling brother, Logan could only emit a hollow laugh. Why had he hesitated for so long over something so simple? While still facing the distrustful gaze of his new mother, Logan stated as if making a vow. Mother, if I had intended to harm Ronian, there were plenty of opportunities even during this war. Instead, you saved my life, brother. My intentions towards Ronian are sincere. I genuinely wish for Ronian to become the successor. What? Brother, I know it's too much to ask for your belief right now. So please, just watch. See how I act. Logan's stepmother did not respond, but for Logan that was enough. Despite the completion of the award distribution, the leadership of the MacLine family had no rest, busy with post-war matters. The most important issue was the conversion of the captured knightly prisoners of war and soldiers. The soldiers needed little persuasion, but the knights took time. The society had an implicit understanding of a knight's duty, the most crucial of which was loyalty. Abandoning the sovereign you serve and swearing fealty to another was like branding oneself a traitor. It impeded social ascension within the nobility and shackled one's status. Nevertheless, there was some room for persuasion, given that it was the same kingdom and king they served, merely switching allegiance to their liege. Though it was like willfully turning a blind eye, such reasoning was very important to individual knights. Without such justification, they would have to choose between death or infamy. They'll all convert because there is a pretext, even if the monthly pay is lower. Knights are human too, and Haemon Teslan was by no means considered a good lord. Of course, time was needed for some who'd put up a fight for the sake of pride. From Logan's point of view, he couldn't comprehend why, but some people emphasized such matters. Apart from that, there were other issues to deal with, such as administrative processes between Teslan and MacLine territories, military deployment for maintaining order, taxes, and issues with territory income. All these remaining problems were not easy to resolve in a short time. Yet Logan, who currently held no official position, was meanwhile calmly seeking his own path amid the chaos. That's why being a successor would be unfavorable. I would have been tied down without rest. It was troubling enough to overcome one of life's hurdles. There was no room to wallow in paperwork. Moreover, now is not the time for that. A flame flickered in Logan's eyes, which appeared tranquil. He had barely crossed over a small wave, but the torrential waves about to crash over the territory and country were just beginning. The final obstacle was the invasion by the Empire, which would destroy the country itself, but a calamity a year later, next winter, was the starting point of the country's decline. The sudden unanticipated death of the current king, Samuel von Grandia. Although royal power had weakened, the king was the legitimate ruler of the kingdom. His abrupt and untimely death plunged the entire kingdom into a profound shock. Admittedly, the psychological impact on the citizens wasn't particularly significant. However, the war that started in Grandia, the capital, due to the king's sudden death and the civil war that broke out among the various claimants to the throne, shook the kingdom for the next 3 years, significantly undermining its military power. The invasion by the Empire began before that power could be restored. It was essentially the primary cause of the nation's downfall. The neutral MacLine territory might have been able to lie low and avoid the turmoil. They could have enjoyed tales of the many heroes and villains born from the Civil War, merely lowering their heads as if seated in an auditorium. But I can't just throw away that opportunity. Logan aimed to actively expand his house's influence during the chaos. As quickly as possible, he planned to regain the former Countum's territory and recapture the lordship of the Southwest region. Moreover, he hoped to become the card that would end the drawn-out civil war, or seek even greater ambition. Snap. Focus. I've just overcome a challenge. It's fortunate that I can even contemplate this. Logan shook himself out of his spiraling thoughts by slapping his cheek and turned his thoughts to immediate actions. There's no use talking about military expansion or inciting a territorial dispute now. I'll just be told I've lost my mind again. From Logan's perspective, it was a time to enhance military forces, but there was no way to convince others of this. So, for now, he needed to acquire that and take a firm grip on the house's finances. Whether to increase military power or recruit talent for combat, no one could object to his management of personal funds. Now was the time to prepare. If the house refuses a territorial dispute, then I will. What exactly are you up to now? As his thoughts spiraled into various possibilities, a voice suddenly shattered Logan's reverie. Turning around, Logan saw a dwarf with a blunt expression slowly following him. At that sight, Logan barely suppressed a chuckle. You've had enough rest. Time to start working. Worried. That's what I am, worried. Seeing Master laugh like this brings back memories of when you squeezed out those items from us. Don't worry. This time, it's definitely something you'll enjoy. How do you know what I'd like? Despite the dwarf's retort, Logan's smile never faded. Unlike humans, whose preferences differ greatly, the forgotten races had common tastes within their kind, and Logan was certain that what he was about to do would suit the dwarf's tastes. Just come along and see. You won't be disappointed. And why are we heading towards the prison? Don't tell me you're going to lock me up for enjoying myself. Stop with the needless worries, Hammer. I'm on my way to fetch the people who will be working with you. To jail? Yes. Hammer looked incredulous, but Logan's words soon became reality. In the MacLine Castle dungeon, where the prisoners were held, in one corner of the sturdy iron cells reserved for knights, there huddled a group of burly middle-aged men, looking unimpressive in terms of strength. Oh ho, he actually came, that young lord. Wow, it really is him. But what's that next to him? Not human? A dwarf? What? A dwarf? Their eyes gleamed as they caught sight of Hammer accompanying Logan. What's with those humans? These were glances that Hammer had never experienced, even in the slave market. Their beards alone were enough to make any dwarf's whiskers bristle. They call themselves geologists or mining experts, but as far as I'm concerned, they're just a bunch of guys obsessed with digging. Miners? Why miners all of a sudden? Because I need them. I'm planning to develop a mine. What? The dwarf was taken aback, and Logan just grinned.